Happy strengthening, gang. Kawaii50 here with another FGO video. And, gang, since it is strengthening season for this character, it is time we revisit Shuten Douji and see how she's doing since she came out in the game oh so long ago. Now, if this video helps you out, be sure to go ahead and leave a like and subscribe for some more content. Let's take a look at Shuten Douji. Let's of course start this off by taking a peek at Shuten's stats. Now Shuten has a pretty decent deck for an assassin. Quick arts buster with an arts type noble phantasm. So yes, she can do that arts brave chain. Her max HP at 12,825 is solid, not really much more to say about that. And her max attack is pretty good at 11,993. Though that number is going to end up not performing nearly as well because assassins have a natural penalty to their attack stat. Something they don't always tell you about in the game, but it is a thing that does exist. Her NP per hit, unfortunately for being an art servant, it's kinda low at a 0.55% chance. And even though she's got 3 hits on her arts cards and 6 hits on her extra attack, her NP gain isn't going to be as good as you would expect from an arts type servant, so you got to make sure that you keep that in mind. Her star absorption though is just pretty standard at a 98, and her 25% star generation is what you'll want from an assassin. 4 hits on those quick cards means she is going to be getting you some stars. Without any standout passives to speak of, let's instead talk about Shuten Douji's skills, starting with her first skill, Intoxicating Aroma of Fruits rank A. This has a 60% chance to apply charm to all enemies for 1 turn and also decreases their defense by 10 to 20% for 3 turns. Now, the really interesting thing about this charm effect is the fact that it affects enemy servants regardless of whether or not they're male, female, or otherwise. It can affect absolutely everybody. So you've got a chance to completely take any enemy out of the fight for 1 single turn. No matter what happens though, you are going to be getting that 10 to 20% defense reduction, making Shuten Douji a pretty reliable debuffer for the rest of your arts team. I would definitely recommend maxing this skill second, so you can get full advantage of that defense reduction. Shuten's second skill is Demonic Nature of the Oni rank A. This increases the attack of all allies, including herself, by 10 to 20% for 3 turns. It also increases her own personal NP strength by 20 to 30% for 3 turns. And it's on a 5-turn cooldown, which is pretty low. You're going to be using this in fights fairly often. I would absolutely recommend you max this first. Not only is this skill Shuten's main source of damage for herself, but it also helps out all of her allies, and who doesn't want that? Shuten Douji's final skill is Battle Continuation rank A+. This gives her Guts 1 time over the course of 5 turns, and depending on how much you've sunk into this skill, she will recover either 1200 to 2700 HP on death. It's always nice when servants have some sort of survivability, whether it's an evade, an invincibility, or a guts, and the same rings true for Shuten Douji. I would still recommend you overall max this last, even though it is a solid bit of HP you can recover. It's not an absolutely oppressive level of guts, like say the skill King Hassan has, so focus on this last. It's just a little bit of extra cushion for Shuten Douji. And now we move on to the main reason this video is out today. Shuten Douji's Noble Phantasm did get a buff. Multicolored Poison Shinpen Kidoku is now a fairly oppressive arts AoE Noble Phantasm. It deals 600 to 900% damage of all enemies, reduces the enemy's debuff resist by 10% for 3 turns, decreases their defense by 10% for 3 turns, decreases their attack, NP strength, and critical rate all on top of that by 10% for 3 turns. It also now inflicts Skill Seal on enemies, and most importantly, the brand new thing that got added is the Toxic status. So for 5 turns, your enemy will have the Toxic status, which increases the poison damage they take by 100%, effectively doubling the poison debuff that these enemies have on them for 5 turns. And that is completely based on overcharge. So with this new Toxic status debuff that got added on here, I would absolutely recommend, if possible, depending on the situation, you use this last. I get it, you have your arts servants. Now, if you're using other arts damage dealers, obviously put this up a little higher in the queue so they get that defensive reduction and your follow-up main damage dealer is able to deal the maximum amount of damage they can possibly deal. But if you're using Shuten, say, as your main damage dealer, and you've got 2 supporting arts servants with her, maybe a Tamamo no Mai, maybe a Castoria, somebody like that, chuck this in the line at the very end so you can absolutely maximize that poison damage. If you're going to go ahead and get this to, say, 300%, which is your main average if you're chucking this at the end, that is going to be a total of 6,000 poison damage over the course of 5 turns. And that can be pretty impressive. Now, of course, if you're using Shuten Douji for, say, damage or for, like, a secondary support, you want to go ahead and pair her with one of the premier arts supporters. So, Castoria or Tamamo no Mai, who you're going to see up on screen, are very, very good choices. You can always go for the more budget options, like, say, Paracelsus von Hohenheim or Mozart. Any of those would work well as well. But for some other characters you could pair Shuten Douji with, if you're looking to get a little interesting with your team comps, I'm going to talk about some servants where you can take full advantage of her new toxic status debuff. Because why not have some fun with the game, especially when there is a new status effect just like this. So for your freebie options, I've got to recommend Robin Hood as well as Hassan of the Serenity. Robin Hood's Noble Phantasm deals extra special attack damage to a poisoned enemy. Thankfully, Shuten Douji's Noble Phantasm does apply poison, so if Robin Hood's Sabotage is on cooldown and you've got a good chance to use his Noble Phantasm, you can use Shuten Douji's Noble Phantasm to power up Robin Hood's. And that's pretty nice. Now, if you're using Hassan of the Serenity, you can of course use her updated Poisoned Blade rank C++ ability, which has a chance to inflict poison and toxic on an enemy. Yes, she can inflict the same status debuff Shuten Douji can use with her Noble Phantasm as a skill. So you can just keep stacking the poison, stacking the toxic, and just being overall a debuff queen. There is, of course, Wu Zetian. Wu Zetian, yeah, she's a quick type character, but Manual of Accusation does deal poison damage, and that Noble Phantasm will stock with Shuten Douji's toxic upgrade. So stacks on stacks on stacks of poison damage there. And finally, I definitely want to recommend Caster of Okeanos. Cersei, she does have her nice little poisoned food debuff, which inflicts poison on all enemies 500 to 1000. Of course, that is also affected by toxic. When it comes to Shuten's best craft essence, it entirely depends on how you are using her in the context of your team. Obviously, if you're using her for farming, Kaleidoscope is just always going to be your best bet. Any instant Noble Phantasm is going to help you clear that wave in the shortest amount of time possible. If you're using her as, say, a more focused damage dealer, say maybe you're fighting a boss or you're doing a challenge quest or something like that, my personal recommendation has to be Dive to Blue. Dive to Blue is not only going to give her that starting NP gauge and a bonus to NP strength, but it's also going to up her arts card effectiveness, which is going to increase both her overall damage as well as her NP gain. And finally, if you're using Shuten Douji as more of a debuffer, you're using her to decrease your enemy's defense, increase your allies' attack, and have a more focused arts damage dealer like, say, a Lancelot being your main source of DPS, I would definitely recommend giving her either a Fragment of 2030 if you're just looking for pure crit stars, or his Rightful Place to get her crit stars on top of a starting Noble Phantasm boost. That way you're able to use the debuffs from her Noble Phantasm faster. Finally, for Shuten Douji's command codes, I think we should definitely focus on critical star absorption for her arts cards to help compensate for a Noble Phantasm gain, and for her other cards, there are actually command codes that really focus well on dealing that poison debuff. So if it's a special effect from her Noble Phantasm, why don't we use it? So for her arts cards, I definitely gotta recommend Immature Illusionary Command Seal. When engraved on an arts card, it increases the star absorption by 100%. 100%, you can make sure all of those stars are flowing to the right card. And when it comes to poison, you do have a couple of options available as well. The 3-star option is Command Seal of Faintly Corrupted Delusions. This inflicts 600 damage worth of poison for 3 turns to an enemy, but it is at the cost of that person taking 100 damage. That's Shuten Douji, not the enemy. But 100 HP is not really a big deal in the grand scheme of things. If you're looking for the big poison damage, I've got to recommend Great Witch's Wheat Porridge. This inflicts poison damage up to 1,000. So you get 1,000 damage a turn for 3 turns when attacking with that card. And the nice bonus from this is instead of dealing damage to Shuten Douji, it's going to heal her by 300 HP. Not super substantial, just like the debuff, but hey, healing HP is better than losing HP, right? At the end of the day, gang, I really do think Shuten Douji is a lot better than a lot of people out there will give her credit for. Yeah, I get it, 3-turn wave clearing is the main focus of FGO, yada yada yada. But the thing is, she can do that. She can absolutely do that. But when it comes to challenge quests, when it comes to big bosses, fighting enemies with break bars, if you're able to use Shuten Douji's Noble Phantasm in quick succession, which is kind of easier to do in an arts team than any other team, you're going to find that she is going to keep the enemy debuffed, she is going to increase your overall team survivability, and she is going to be a very oppressive force on the battlefield, whether she is your main damage dealer or she is helping out another damage dealer to reach their full potential. Seriously, gang, at the end of the day, don't count Shuten Douji out. And those are my overall thoughts on Shuten Douji. If you've got your own personal thoughts on Shuten, say you've got other allies that you think will be really good with her, you got some other craft essences you've used on her that have been to great success, or you just want to show off your favorite Shuten Douji focused team, why don't you go ahead and let us all know down in the comments section below. If you think I'm doing a good job, you can always hit me up on the Patreon. I appreciate all of the support I have gotten there, and I am working with a patron right now to put out a patron-designed video, so you can all look forward to that. If you want to watch me stream, I'm on Twitch, and if you want to talk FGO, you can join us down in the Discord below. This is Kawaii50, hoping you all have a phenomenal day, and I'll see y'all in the next video.